Okay, we're looking at 6-4. We're finding the percents of a number, and there's two ways to do it. The first way that we're working on is just converting the percent to a decimal and then multiplying, because we've multiplied by decimals before. Pretty easy. So let's review multiplying by decimals. Let's say this square is 1, and we're multiplying 5/10 of, or times 3/10, or 3/10 of 5/10. And we multiplied using grids, like we know that 5 by 5 grid is 25 square units. So 5/10, so each of this square is cut into 10 pieces this way. So each of these long columns is 1/10 of the square. And we've cut it into rows this way. So each one of these rows or longs is 1/10 of the one whole square. So if I go 5/10, make my rectangle 1, 2/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10 by 3/10, 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. I have this much. And each one of these tiny squares is 100th. So I have 5 by 3 here, hundredths, 5 by 3 hundredths. So I have 15 hundredths. 0 and 15 hundredths. And now the standard algorithm way that would be to go write it out. And the little trick of the algorithm is just to multiply them like they don't have any decimals in it. 3 times 5 is 15. And then count how many numbers are behind the decimal point in each factor. So there's 1 here, 1 here. That's 2. And then you move this decimal over that many spaces. 1, 2. So it'd be right here, and then put a 0 in the 1. So it's 15 hundredths. 0 and 15 hundredths. Okay, so that's a little algorithm trick, but this is what we're doing here. We're making a 5/10 by 3/10 grid on 1, taking a portion of this. All right, so 6/10 times 4/10, or 4/10 of 6/10. So this would be 6/10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this whole thing would be 6/10 here. And let's say I have 4/10 of that 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be here. And here we go. And that would be this much I'd have if I had 4/10 of this whole big blue square is the 6/10, and I have 4/10 of it. That would be 1, 2, 6 by 4 grid. Each one of these is 100th. That would be 24 hundredths. 0.24. And the standard algorithm trick is to write them out. 0.6 times 0.4 and multiply. 6 times 4 is 24. Pretending like there are no decimals at all, and then counting how many digits are behind the decimal point in each factor. So there's 1 in the first one, 1 in the second. Together that's 2. So then your product, or your final answer, has 2 numbers behind it. You move it over once, twice. So 0.24 is 0 and 24 hundredths. You get the same answer whether you do it visually here or use the algorithm. Let's move on and look at your homework for tonight. So we have 5% of 150. So that's going to be 150. I have just 5% of it. So my trick way is to convert this to a decimal. 1. Add a 0, move it 2 places. So 5 hundredths is the same as 5%. And then just multiply. 0. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 1 is 5. Plus 2 is 7. And I can forget about this 0 here. But then I see, where do I put my decimal point here? I pretended like I didn't have one. And then I see how many numbers are behind the decimal point in each factor. 0 here and 1, 2 here. So I move mine over 1, 2. So 5% of 150 is 7 and 5/10. That's meant 7 and 5/10. So let's look at 90% of 180. Let's convert 90% to a decimal. 1, 2, 0, and 90 hundredths. Now we weren't talking about 9/10 is the same as 90 hundredths. So if you look at this, 90 hundredths would be this right here. And that's the same if this, we were just counting the tenths, each row, 2, 3, that would be 10. But if we're counting, that's the same as counting all the squares, that's 90. In other words, zeros to the right of the decimal point don't change the value. So a shortcut here, I can write it as 180 times 9/10. And multiply as if there's no decimal point. You know, I certainly could write it as 180 times 0.90. I'd get the same answer. 9 times 0 is 0. 9 times 8 is 72. 9 times 1 is 9, plus 7 is 16. And how many numbers are behind the decimal point? 1. So 162 is 90% of 180. I'd get the same thing here. I'd get just 16,002. I'd have that extra 0 on the end, and then I'd move this over once, twice. 162. Anyway, so it's 162 is 90% of 180. And 160 is pretty close to 180. It's 10%, you know, a little bit less. So it makes sense. All right. Let's do one more. Now, 125% is greater than 1 whole. So it's going to be, I'm getting a number that's greater than 48. So percent means per 100. So if I have 125, 1 out of 100, or 125 per 100, or if we've been talking about test questions, there's 100 questions on the test, I got 125 right. I got greater than the whole test right, more points than the test is worth, in other words. So 125 to 100. So I'm going to get something greater than 48. So let's convert this to a decimal. I move it over 2 to the left. So I get 1.25 times 48. And I can multiply as if there's no decimal. 5 times 8 is 40. 16. 8 times 2, 16, plus 4 more is 20. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 2 more is 10. Okay, now I add a 0 for my second row because I'm multiplying 40 by 121.25. Well, 125, I'm pretending the decimals aren't there. So 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 2 more is 10. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. And I'm going to get 6,000 when I add up my rows. This should be review. Now we ask how many numbers are behind the decimal point. Here I have in the first factor 2, second factor 0. So the total of 2, 1, 2. So 125% of 48 is 60. And it should be greater than 48 because 125% is more than 1. Let's look at the word problem, the last one, number. Largest frog in the world is the Goliath, found in West Africa. This type of frog can grow to be 12 inches long. The smallest frog in the world is about 4% as long as the Goliath. What is the approximate length of the smallest frog in the world? So it's 4% of 12 inches. So it's 12. Now I got to write 4% as a decimal. So it's 4 hundredths really. So 1, move it over 2, place it to the left. 0.04, 0.04. So figure out 4% of 12. I'm going to multiply as if the decimal's not there. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 1 is 4. And then count how many numbers are behind the decimal. The first factor 0, second factor 2. 1, 2. So 0.48 hundredths of an inch. So it's about a half an inch long, this the smallest frog in the world. Okay, so there we go. That's our answer here. The secret word is froggy.